Hello?
So, yes, I
What?
can hear you. We can all hear you. And we are, I think we're live. We should be
Okay,
live
cool.
now. So if you want to say all your funny jokes and everything. I think it might be a good idea to redo that introduction thing because that was good.
Okay. You want me to
Sure,
say
go for it.
go? All right.
Your brother just
So I'm
disappeared
Kieran.
from the meeting, but
Do you want to just keep going?
yeah, of course.
All right. So I'm Kieran Lisney, and David is my good Canadian buddy, and I've been on his CVS podcast 3 times,
There we
and
go.
this is this is the first time I'm on his podcast as an Orthodox Christian. All previous times it was Protestant or searching or a catechumen in the Orthodox Church, but now I'm fully received into the Orthodox Church. So that's where I'm at now.
Very cool. Congratulations on that. It's amazing.
Thanks,
Amazing.
man.
What about you, Aidan?
I'm Aidan. I've been on twice, I think. Talked a bunch more times than I only email him opinions when something is off or I need to ask a question.
Mhm.
And that's our whole relationship, right, David?
No, I mean, we pray for each other, right?
We do that.
We do
I tell
that.
you
We
that I
do
pray
that.
for you, but then I
Yeah.
forget.
I thought that's all it was. I mean, that's what I do. Because I a lot of the time I just remind the Blessed Virgin that I want you on my implicit daily prayer intentions, right? Because I don't list every single name. There are too many names.
Well, you should
Yeah.
list mine.
I should list yours. Yes, I should. So, yeah, I do mention you by name when you remind me, but then the next day I just go back to having the implicit prayer list. And there's no disrespect intended. It's just I don't like having to add names to a list of memorized names. And so please don't take it personally. And whenever I do interact with you, anyone, I always mention them by name that night. So I don't know if that's a proper way of managing prayer lists,
I
but
think
that's how I
so.
do it.
I think that's basically how I do it too.
Anyone that's on my mind that day gets a special mention. So when people reach out to me, it does bring them grace of a certain kind, a little booster shot of grace because I get mentioned by name in my prayers. And
I don't know. The way that I've been reading about prayers and like seeking out prayers of other people, it seems a little bit more generic in that sense because the viewpoint is generally that God's will is for whatever God's will is, and so we just pray that God's will be done. And so the prayer can take on a more generic sense, and like a general well-being can encompass that person, which I think is actually kind of nice in a certain way, because then I don't have to worry about like any of the particulars. I just have to, like, even if you just have a general idea of a person or a group of people, and then like letting the intercessor or letting God just kind of fill in the blanks, because it's like, I don't know what's good for that person. I don't know what's good for me. So you just do that. And
do you explicitly ask for the true and lasting conversion of people? That's what I do.
Yeah, I do things like that. But like that's not like my entire, I don't know how much of my prayer that makes up. You know what I mean?
But in
So,
terms
like,
of emphasis, like if it's like, my friend is sick, please give her health, and true and lasting conversion, I put a lot more emphasis on the true and lasting conversion than on the little sickness and the health. Like that's a good thing, obviously, to wish on someone, but it might not be God's will for that person. So my emphasis is always on the true and lasting conversion.
That's cool.
I don't know if that's helpful to you.
It's not helpful, David. What garbage advice, once again.
What about your quiet little brother over there? What's he think? Kieran?
It's probably never mind. Just gonna make another gay joke at Kieran's expense.
Typically, I'm not as good at praying for people's conversion so much if I don't know them.
Okay.
So like if somebody is like an acquaintance or whatever, and they have a prayer need, and they say, "Oh, can you pray for, my mom? She's in the hospital," or something like that. I'll pray specifically about that. But when it comes to like people in my family or my life that are closer to me generally, if they say, you know, I have a specific prayer intention, or even if they don't ask me for it and I just pray for them anyhow, I'm also praying for their salvation. So it's kind of like a you and Aiden, I guess, but I'm pretty bad at, like, you know, the average person on the street and being like, oh, I hope they get saved. I mean, I do, but that's not my first thought because I'm super selfish. So I'm just like, whatever. I want to be saved.
And now if I tell somebody I'm praying for them, I try to actually pray for them right at that moment.
Then. That's one thing I've been doing too. And I'll usually in that case, I'll just say a quick Hail Mary or something like that for somebody.
I'm not good like that, dude. I just ask God to smile on them. That's all Oh,
that's good.
I mean, it works. It's easy. You fulfill a promise, and prayer doesn't have to be hard.
Yeah.
It just has to be.
Just help them out in that moment. Yeah.
Do you do your penance immediately if you go to confession and get a penance? Do you try to do it as soon as possible?
Yeah. Usually when I'm walking away feeling like nailed it, Aidan. Haha.
In the Orthodox Church, they give Our Father prayers, or what do they give for penances?
So penances, it can be literally anything. It could be just like it is in the Catholic Church, almsgiving, whatever. Typical would be like, you know, say
give me $20.
Say an extra 100 Jesus prayers or something like that, or add 5 prostrations to your morning prostrations or something like that. So it doesn't, I mean, I'm sure every priest is different, but my spiritual father is really traditional. So typically it will be say more Jesus prayers for somebody, or pick somebody out and instead of praying for yourself through the Jesus prayer, insert that person's name along with your own in there, or say, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on us, rather than, or your servant Adrian or your servant Aidan or something like that. So that's a typical penance.
What about indulgences? Does the Orthodox Church have any concept like indulgences that we can draw on every time we pray and get the benefit for ourselves or the souls in purgatory or anyone else?
I mean, we're constantly asked to pray for each other, and but there's no defined doctrine of any type of treasury of merit or anything like that. So there wouldn't be like, oh, Saint Paisios was really super good in his life, so he did so much extra. Now we can draw from that. We would just simply say, well, Saint Paisios, pray for me because you're closer to God now. So that I mean, there is a difference.
The one difference that comes to mind is that we Catholics have to have the conscious intention of gaining an indulgence to gain an indulgence, right. Whereas if I just ask a saint to pray for me or for mine, it's powerful and effective, and their grace is involved, but I'm not getting that extra boost of the indulgences. You see, there is a difference there. It's like I don't claim to know how indulgences really play out in the real spiritual world, but I like having that little bit of extra icing on the cake, and I wonder if it's been discussed among Orthodox theologians, or if it's just completely dismissed out of hand.
I mean, because there's no idea of purgatory in I mean, obviously we could be talking about temporal sins in this life in the Catholic setting. It's not just for purgatorial needs, because right now we're in a sense we're in purgation right now. We're ridding ourselves of passions. But I think because there's no doctrine of purgatory in Orthodoxy, that the two kind of go hand in hand. So one would expect that there would be a discussion about that if there was in fact an understanding of purgatory in the Orthodox ethos, but there's so.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Come on, Aiden, get your COVID out of here.
Did you want to acknowledge openly and publicly what your cough is all about, or no?
Yeah, I have COVID. No big deal.
Can we get it?
It's not a real disease, guys. Yeah, you guys should be wearing masks.
Have you seen anyone suffer and die from COVID in your hospital down in Florida or elsewhere?
I haven't seen anybody die, but I've been working with people. I worked with somebody who was most likely going to die.
Okay.
But that patient was moved off my floor. But that patient was very sick, tons of comorbidities.
Yeah.
I don't like working with COVID patients. It's very frightening. Very high acuity, very sick human beings.
Yeah.
A lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's very difficult. A lot of suffering.
Will you be immune or only to one of the 5,000 strains after you get through this COVID?
I don't know. And it's funny because like I was asked to like, did you get the vaccination? And I'm like, no. And they're like, did they offer it to you? Yeah, I just don't. This is the worst that it's been. This is like,
how many days in
I've
are
been
you?
1 million. It was since last Wednesday. Since last Wednesday that I technically had it. But I've been chilling, man. We got HBO Max, so Friends on.
You sound
board.
you sound sicker now than you did like 3 days ago.
Yeah, I probably am, but I don't. It's still not that bad. I'd still be going to work if I didn't know I had COVID. I'd be like, whatever, like.
Yeah.
So you trust the test results that you actually do have COVID?
Yeah. I don't feel right.
Get him, David.
I know there's something wrong.
No, but I mean, you might just have something else and you got a false positive. Any chance of that?
I mean, there's always chances of that, sure.
Or does it feel significantly different?
No.
Can you speak Mandarin
sick.
or Cantonese now? That's politically incorrect joke. Sorry.
What? I don't because it came from China. I get what you're saying.
I think it came from the U.S. I think it was an import into Wuhan from the U.S. That's what I've heard. But like I told you before we went live, I've been watching a lot of right-wing conspiracy theories, which are most.
So is everything you're saying very tongue-in-cheek right now?
A lot of it.
Is it like...
A lot of it, yeah.
Okay. No, I don't know
David.
anything about it other than it's, nice to have some time
David.
off.
Yes, Kieran.
So I kind of like laid off the conspiracy after I'd say like the first like eight months. So like, what are we in? Like we're in month 11. We're almost at a year or something like that.
Yeah.
Or we are at a year? Are we at a year yet? I don't know. Anyhow, I'd say like 8 or 9 months in, I stopped like probably actually after the election cycle. I laid off the conspiracy because it was it's inundating the entire family.
Oh.
And people are going insane. And it's like, what you and I were talking about last year at this time when you were talking about conspiracy theories and the evil that's behind them, in a lot of ways. I've done a little bit more research into finding validity in that I think that there actually is like this whole awakening thing that people are talking about. I actually truly believe that it's a false light awakening, that people are thinking that they're being awakened in a lot of ways, but it's kind of like a bait and switch.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
you're talking spiritually, like Satan, or are you talking?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
But it manifests in the physical. So I think that honestly, like, because I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I've never voted in my life. I will never vote in my entire life. And I'm 100,000% sure that I will never vote, no matter who is the candidate, because I just put no faith in it whatsoever.
Yeah.
But if somebody wants to vote, that's cool.
Yeah.
People get really passionate about it, but it is something super divisive.
Yeah.
But I think that Trump was a useful idiot in a lot of ways. And I think that he was there primarily to sow more division, because a lot of the things that people were, cheering Trump on for, in regards to exposing fake news and the corruption in the political sphere, all these different socioeconomic spheres that are obviously corrupted, he's pointing these out, but at the same time, he's pushing agendas like Operation Warp Speed, the vaccine. He's pushing all these other agendas that you're like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. If he's on our side, why is he still doing this? Or also him calling himself the chosen one, and Israel regards him as Ben Yosef, Mashiach, but Ben Yosef.
Oh.
I mean, it's crazy, dude. Like, I don't know.
Who's
I think
Israel?
it's a false awakening. It's a guy. It's a cool guy.
I think a lot of because I've been watching so much conspiracy stuff just for entertainment. Like I watched the most outrageous guy. I won't mention him because I don't want to sort of draw attention. But
Dave, what's his name?
he believes that snow is a man-made, government-made conspiracy theory. There's no such thing as snow. It's all man-made.
Oh, good grief.
Wait,
good
like
grief.
snow as in like snow that falls from the sky?
Yeah.
Snow?
Yeah, like the weather phenomenon.
Because
So,
his rationale is hot air rises, so it's impossible for ice to form up higher in the atmosphere. And so, I mean, that's about as deep as his science goes. But anyway, just to say that I think a lot of conspiracy theorists are simpletons that just get that attention from saying outrageous things, and I watch him because he's outrageous, right? So I'm feeding that, I guess. But I think a lot of it's demonic, just like Kieran was saying.
Yeah.
It works in a very, the serpent is the most subtle of the creatures, so he'll insinuate himself into your mind and into your beliefs, and then before you know it, you've got a really popular conspiracy theory going. And once it's going, it's kind of hard to be critical of your own monstrosity that you've created.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about it in regards to the serpent being cunning is that most people, we see it's the left-right paradigm, right versus left, good versus evil. And what I see, although the Democratic Party is horrendous in a lot of ways, obviously, people tend to think like, oh, when Satan appears, when the Antichrist appears, it's going to be in the form of a socialistic dictatorship, the one world order, that sort of thing, right? But if you actually think about it in light of as Satan disguising himself as an angel of light, it wouldn't be that obvious. So what I personally think is that in the eschaton, when all of this goes down, could be 100 years from now, could be 1,000 years from now, whatever, there's going to be a false flag situation, like a new world order in which we all are controlled by a dictatorship, a global dictatorship, and the solution is going to come in, and the person who offers the solution to that social dictatorship is actually going to be
the Antichrist,
the man of perdition.
Okay.
Exactly. So that's kind of my overall thing. So like that's all I know, broad scope. That's all I know, broad scope, though. But most people think like, yeah, he's just going to rule with an iron fist, and it's like, no. It actually says the opposite in Scripture. It says he's going to deceive, if possible, even the very elect.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I mean, we would know right off the bat if the dude is a dictator. Like, yeah, that's not the person instead of Christ.
Yeah.
That is a total. It's going to be the person offering the solution. That's really the Antichrist.
And he's supposed to be mortally wounded, meaning that there's some sort of self-sacrifice or a heroic gesture that's made, right? In getting wounded and almost dying or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly.
I agree with you. We need to go a little bit further than the surface on all these conspiracy theories, and they are toxic, they are demonic, I think, and I've just been indulging in it because I've been away from the sacraments so much. Like, we're on lockdown here, and the churches are all closing, and I've managed now to find a place where I can reserve and I can get the sacraments.
That's crazy.
So,
it's still like that?
Yeah, we have a curfew here. It's like
because like COVID will get you if you're out too late.
Well, it's because they don't want, I guess, young people going and mixing it up after dark. And I don't know. I mean,
as if that's gonna stop young people from going outside after dark, and like doing anything.
You could just have your little party and stay up all night, I guess. I mean, nothing could stop me if I were young and wanted to party with my friends. Nothing could stop me, that's for sure. But I do have some sympathy for the governments of the world and for my local and provincial government here, because no matter what you do, you're going to get flack for it. I mean, if you're too strict, not strict enough, like no matter what you do, if you're too consistent, or if you change too much, like no matter what you do, you're going to get harsh criticism. So I think you're between a rock and a hard place if you're trying to govern and guide the masses. Like, that's a tough job.
I'm sorry, guys.
Okay. So I want to talk about the Orthodox Catholic common ground and, this whole thing with the Hesychast movement and all that sort of thing, because that's what you showed some interest in, Aidan. Do you want to sort of pinpoint some of the questions and directions you want to take that with your brother? Or maybe Kieran can step in right away.
Kieran, you're knowledgeable. So Kieran and I have had a couple of discussions on this, and as of late, a third party was involved named George. What's up, George? And George is Orthodox, and we were chatting about hesychasm, and I'm like, the more that I pray the rosary, I'm like, oh, the rosary is a prayer of the heart. It's something very similar. I think that the same thing is happening. I just think the methodology might be tweaked. I think there might be some differences here. And the more that I come into contact with hesychasm, I'm like, oh, that seems like a really tried and true path, and very beautiful. Obviously, the name means such, but when I was bringing it up with George and Kieran, you didn't specifically express an opinion, but George pretty emphatically stated that no, Catholic theology and Orthodox theology, they cannot coexist. And I said, well, what if it's a problem with language? Like, what if it's just two people using different words for the same kind of phenomenon, and then like just bickering over
terminology
and like semantics? And he's like, no, like, they immediately pulled out words that I didn't understand, and immediately pulled out concepts that I didn't understand. And so the first thing they said was, that just doesn't jive with divine simplicity, man. Which, like, I don't know anything about, other than I know that God is supposed to be simple, not complex. And I think what was being said
not composite.
Not composite. So like when you hold an iPhone versus holding an Android, you feel the iPhone and you're like, simple, light, beautiful.
Simple.
But then it was said, the essence energies distinction is then made, and God can't be simple, I think, divinely simple in those terms if he has essence and energies. Is that kind of the argument, Kieran?
No, so God is simple. So this is a really weighty topic, and the reason why I hesitate to speak on it is because I'm not well versed on it either, and I don't. At this point in my life, I don't care to be so well versed on it. But so when we're talking about Hezekiah, basically, Hezekiah is not just like when you tend to think in Catholic terms, you think of, oh, I'm of the Franciscan school of thought. I'm from the Carmelite school of thought. I'm from the whatever. Augustinian school of thought, the Aquinas school of thought. So you have all these different either philosophical or maybe theological leanings that accent and pinpoint different parts about the Catholic faith. So it's not to say that any of them are like dialectically opposed to each other. It's just to say that the Aquinas school focuses, the emphasis is different. Whereas in Orthodoxy, the emphasis is all in Hesychia, which is why specifically in the monastic orders, you don't see a differentiation between a monk in Russia and a monk on Mount Athos, because it's all one order. It's just, there's no delineation. They're all practicing the prayer of silence. They're all practicing Hesychia. But the reason why, when we talk about God and what is the nature of God's being, this is particularly pertinent because this is how God is, or who he is, or how he is defined, is directly connected to how we have access to him or how we can interact with him. So in further looking into what the Catholic definition of divine simplicity would be, it doesn't seem, and David, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem to me that there is actually a dogmatic decree on the Aquinan type of leaning towards absolute divine simplicity, or the Franciscan Scoden kind of thought where there is distinction in God, but it's a formal distinction. It's not an actual distinction. So I think it could be a semantical thing. From what I understand, we would say that there are actual distinctions in God, obviously starting at the basis from the Trinity. So you would say Father, Son. You good? We would see Father, Son, Holy Spirit. There's a real distinction between the persons and obviously the essence. God the Father is not his essence. He has the divine essence. Same thing with the Son, same thing with the Holy Spirit. They share the same essence. Just as you or I would share human nature, but our human nature doesn't give us our personhood. It doesn't give us our personality. It doesn't give us our specificity, basically. So like me, you, and David all share human nature, but let's say, for instance, Aidan, you're more into cars or something, and I'm more
not.
into drawing. Right, exactly. But you have
Don't
these
tell the-
different
don't tell anybody
distinctions.
that.
We have these different distinctions within us, and let's say a lower life form could look at us and say, "Oh, I know that they have human nature because of the energies that they have, because of the activities that they possess, the activities that they perform. I can see from those activities that they share a common human nature." So let's take creation, for instance. We can translate this then to God. Let's say Christ, we know, created everything, right? Holy Spirit shares in creation. God the Father shares in creation. Creation is a specific activity or energe, which is just the Greek word for energy, which only God possesses. So because Christ possesses an energetic creativity, same thing with the Holy Spirit, same thing with God the Father, this specific energy of creation is not equal to the divine essence, but it points to the divine essence. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when we talk about interacting with God, there's no way that we can interact with his nature, with his essence. It is through his activities, whether they're infinite activities or they're finite activities, whether they're passive or they're active. It's through these things that we interact with God. So God's love, his glory, these would be instances of infinite activities or passive and could be active activities. But something like the incarnation was a specific point in time where that came into. The incarnation was not from all eternity to eternity. The sonship was, but not the incarnation. So these are all distinct energies that interplay with each other. And when we're talking about prayer, what we're interacting with is the grace of God, which would be another energy. And the reason why we know that this has to be equal to God on some level is because grace by nature is uncreated. Otherwise, it doesn't have the ability to save you. Grace is everything that's given to us. And David, you talked about this a lot, or at least I think you did, how everything is grace. You know, the things that we are given, it's all by God's grace. And so this we know is one of his energies. This is what energizes us in the sacraments. This is what energizes the host in the sacraments. This is what energizes our prayer life, how we interact with him, how we commune with him. And this is the uncreated light that Hezekiah is always constantly searching for. So the ultimate goal in prayer from the Orthodox perspective and from the Catholic perspective, whether some Catholics know it or not, is union with Christ through the uncreated light that they saw on Mount Tabor. And Christ says in I think it was in the Gospel of John, Christ says, "I share the same glory that my Father in heaven has from all eternity to eternity, and this is the glory that I'm going to share with you." So if God has this glory from all eternity to eternity, that means it's not finite, which means it's uncreated. And if we're going to share in that, that also means we're participating in that uncreated energy or that uncreated light or that uncreated grace. So all that to say, basically, David or George and I haven't talked much about this. So he's obviously way more well-versed than I am on it. I would simply say that for from the Orthodox perspective, from what I know of people who have very, very surface level understanding of Catholic theology and praxis, which is really what we're talking about, they would look at some of the different, almost like the cafeteria kind of picking and choosing of whether it's a specific devotion or it's a specific kind of type of prayer or whatever. Most Orthodox, I think, would look at that and say, well, that's weird. We just have, like, we're all just trying to do the same thing in the Orthodox. And at bottom, Catholics are doing the same thing. But there's there's such a differentiation between different schools of thought and praxis
The way I would
in the Catholic Church.
the way I would talk about it is in terms of video games. Like you can today, and I think since the beginning of video games development, there have been games within games, so you can be a character moving around in a world, and then you can approach a computer, and if you know the password, you can get in, and then you can play games on the computer. So it's sort of a meta thing. So I think what you're saying, and I think the way that I don't think there's any conflict between the Orthodox and Catholic positions on essence, energies, and all that sort of thing, and you know, any of the issues that you talked about. I don't think there's any difference between. There's nothing that's been dogmatically fixed by the Catholic Church that's in contradiction to anything you said.
Yeah.
I got COVID too. Just kidding. But
you caught it through the phone.
What I would say, you to wear your mask.
What I would say is that the vision that you're painting, Kieran, of the Orthodox way is reminiscent, I guess, of the red pill in the Matrix, where instead of being on your computer playing a game, and within the game world you find a computer and you log into that computer and you play a game on that computer, which will be the Catholic sort of very abstract approaches to theosis. What you are emphasizing always and everywhere is take off your virtual reality headset and you're sitting beside Jesus right now, right here, right now, right? So all of the games within games are designed by Jesus Christ to bring us to the point where we can remove the virtual reality headset, turn and embrace our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who's true God and true man. So what you're claiming is that the Orthodox just skip all of the games that were designed by Jesus to help those of us who are maybe further away from the theosis. And you're saying, just to emphasize this one approach, which lifts the veil, right, through a series of techniques of what I guess we could call quietism, which has been condemned by the Catholic Church. So that might be a sticking point. Quietism has been condemned by the Catholic Church very explicitly.
Yeah, but quietism is another thing that confuses me, David, because there's so many, like, that word has been used for like a lot of different things. It's kind of like modernism. The more people say quietism and the more people say modernism, the more I'm like, I don't understand what either of those two things are.
Well, it's an inactivity. It's a purposeful inactivity whereby you have an attitude of complete passivity, right? That's the crux. That's the crux of quietism, where you relinquish your desire for salvation. For example, that's how extreme quietism is, right? You relinquish your desire.
That sounds like centering prayer.
That's what I was just going to say. That sounds more like centering prayer to me. But no, that is completely opposite of Hezekiah.
Right. But there might be some concerns among some Catholics who don't understand Orthodoxy to clump them in together. You see what I mean? So I'm not saying that the Orthodox approach is quietism. What I'm saying is there might be some confusion about that, and on the surface it might look like that because your Orthodox approach, from the way you've described it, and I've never heard it described that way before, even though I know there's a more mystical approach in the Orthodox Church. My wife is Orthodox, even though she doesn't practice. But if you just look at if you look at the liturgies, you can see that the mystical component, and even in the iconography and all that. But what I'm saying is that to defend my Catholic approach with the game and the game within the game and so on and so forth, these sort of nested games within games, that's been provided by the economy of salvation, which is designed and guided by God Almighty. I think that we might be tempted, if we're Orthodox, we might be tempted to look down our nose at some of these games within games and to poo-poo some of the devotions that are quaint and maybe popular devotions that arose in a peasant culture or something like that, whereas God would see all of that as equally valuable, and everyone's in a position to be saved. Everyone gets enough grace to be saved, and it's not just for the superstars that are able to lift the veil and remove that virtual reality headset. So I'm not accusing you personally of being a snob.
No.
I'm saying
I think all
it might be a temptation if you're Orthodox, if you have a strong ego and if you're prone to vanity and pride. it might be a temptation. It would certainly be a temptation for me.
I
That's
think
probably
what I
that's
would
funny.
I think what I would probably respond to that is simply that we're all given the same gospel. So it doesn't matter if you're a monk, it doesn't matter if you're a layperson or if you're a priest or a bishop or an archbishop, or in Catholicism, it doesn't matter if you're a cardinal or whatever. We're all expected to do and sacrifice the same way. But that looks differently depending upon the vocation this one person might have. So you better believe that there's not Orthodox Christians, every single one of them, walking around saying the Jesus prayer 24/7. That far from it. There's plenty of monks that don't even do that. Basically, the grace that we're given, we're called to respond to synergistically. So that's going to look different for different people. I think ultimately what the Hesychistic tradition, which really is just the Orthodox tradition, tries to get down to at bottom, is that we want to be in union with Christ. And there also is there's a real hesitation to use personal imaginations, personal images, things that you concoct in your mind, because we know that our hearts are desperately wicked. And so if we get taken down that path, there's a real chance we could be deluded in a lot of areas. So we emphasize having a spiritual father to help guide you into this and to keep you from falling into pride, into temptation. Having a spiritual father, fasting as best you can, praying as often and as best you can, and at bottom trying to just love people as best you can, whether that be a Catholic or a Hindu or a Buddhist or whoever. Orthodoxy, to me, the reason why it's so beautiful is because it kind of has like I hesitate to say the word duality to it, but when I first looked at Orthodoxy, I thought to myself, boy, they don't really seem to have anything pinned down. And then when I started to become catechized, I thought, wow, man, they're like really strict on a lot of things. Like they have a lot of things really pinned down. It's just that in Orthodoxy, there's not so much of a dialectical tension. We don't try and evaluate paradigmatic things through dialectics. So the Western mindset
That's what
is
I was saying
essentially
this whole time.
the Western mindset is essentially to say, and I'm not saying, if you're in the West, this is automatically your viewpoint. I'm just saying that it's common in Western Enlightenment thought to oppose things. So that's why you have Protestants and Catholicism and Catholics thinking that they are diametrically opposed in so many ways, but it's because they're trying to answer a question that doesn't even necessarily need to be asked. Same thing with modernists or secularists or what have you. So Orthodoxy tries to take a step back and say, well, is that even the proper question? And I guess to some that would look like, well, that's kind of like high-minded and douchey. But ultimately, the emphasis is to find salvation and to gain union with Christ. So it's not that we would automatically write off, like for instance, the Rosary. There are Orthodox that pray the Rosary. That I don't know if they would pray it in the same way that a Catholic would, but I mean certainly these things are not. It's not like everything is in a box basically. That tends to be what I see in Western Christianity is we have to put all these things in their neat little theological boxes, and we need to have it all in a specific place. And that's just not how it is in the Orthodox Church. That's why when we say prayer of the heart, most people equate that with the Jesus prayer. But the prayer of the heart that's not a prayer. That's a state. That's to be engaged with the prayer of the heart can be done through the Rosary. It can be done through saying, God, have mercy on me. It could be through going throughout your day and just lifting your thoughts to God constantly, as St. Augustine says, when he says that to be in ceaseless prayer is to always want to be in ceaseless prayer. That can be prayer of the heart. It's just how much are we devoting to that? And I'll be the first to say that even though the Jesus prayer is my devotion, I barely get by on my prayer rule as it is, with what my spiritual father tells me to do, because I'm horrible. But yeah, I mean, but I do understand totally what you're saying. Some people could look at that and be just like, the Palamites, as they're called, Saint Gregory Palamas. They used to call them navel gazers because they couldn't understand why they were always hunching their backs and sitting on stools to pray. But I guess it's just, again, kind of what Aidan said earlier. Maybe there's some terminology or traditional things that aren't understood, because we're, at this point, I mean, the West and the East, specifically Catholics and Orthodox, we're so similar in so many ways, but there's such a chasm between us in other areas that it's like, well, that's stupid. The immediate thing to do on either side is to just write the other one off, which is, a shame, but it is what it is at this point.
Aidan,
David.
any response?
Were you listening? Actually, I was gonna say some of the time. Yeah, some of the time. Now I'll have to go back.
I ramble.
Watch this. I have to cough.
Okay, well,
go
back and watch
Do you need
it.
like a cough drop? Do you have water?
Good, no, I don't know. I'm with me. What I was going to say is actually, David, the cool thing about the prescription that Kieran's talking about, which you say you can, like, there's a tendency towards pride, and I'm like, oh, well, that's probably why I'm attracted to it. But one of the things is when you get catechized in the Catholic Church, once you're done, you're like, okay, cool. And it's like, so what? Do I find a confessor now? And it's like, yeah, I guess if you want to, just come on Sundays, and don't not show up, because that's a mortal sin. And make sure you're here those couple extra days. And then it's like, okay, but what else? And they're like, it's like, you can read a little bit. It's good to do some spiritual reading every once in a while.
Yeah,
it's like, okay.
I'm jealous of the guidance that Kieran has. I mean, I wish I had. It's not that I haven't been trying to find a spiritual father, a guide. It's just it's hard to find a holy Catholic priest, right? And if you find a holy Catholic priest, I can guarantee you he's even busier than the unholy ones. So,
right.
Or the less holy ones. But it was a life-changing thing for me reading the Philokalia, or however you pronounce it. And every time I would watch Catholic media, that's why I stopped watching Catholic media, was because I just kept thinking, okay, all your arguments, all your presentation, all your polemic, it seemed transparently obvious that this was a deliberate distraction from examining your own appetites. Like, that just seemed painfully obvious after having read the Philokalia. It's like, why aren't you disciplining yourself? Why aren't you controlling your appetites and examining yourself? Why aren't you entering into that self-examination? I mean, that just it just turned me off from watching any talking heads talking about religion, because it seems like you're wasting time. You should be confronting yourself and you're getting control of your appetites.
Well, and that's when I was reading some of the Desert Fathers stuff. I told Kieran this the other day. I'm like, there's a discrepancy between that Christianity and the Christianity of today. And as I said, this looks different than Catholicism. And, what's wrong here? Or when I read St. Anthony of the Desert, and I'm like, there's something really pure and beautiful about this that seems to be, like, there's just so much stuff because of the variety in Catholicism, which I'm not necessarily poo-pooing, because I think it's really good, David. Like you're saying, it reaches out to a lot of people and hits different people where they're at. It's like, okay, the variety is good, but like there's a loss of something there, because there's so many variations. It makes you go like, yeah, but how do you cut to the chase? And so with Hezekiah, there's this direct route, and it's like, well, we know that this works, and you should do this, you should follow this path here and avoid these things, and just go this route. My only trepidation with some of those old works is that they're all written for monks. That's not my only trepidation, but they're all written for monks. So then you have to adapt that to, like, how does the modern married man apply this to their life, in like a healthy way. And also like priests. So I have a really smart priest, he's great. but he's super Western.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I said to him like, "Hey, Chief, talk to me about this," he'd probably be like, "Yeah, that's a thing. I don't really know anything about it." And then I'd be like, "Cool, that's great.
Yeah,
Who does?" And it's like you have to, I want there to be some kind of standardizations that you can seek that out and you can go and get that for yourself.
Yeah.
And because all cohesiveness seems to be gone.
Excuse me.
That's why. Why are both of you guys coughing?
It's contagious. I mean,
Yeah. David, go get tested.
What's going on?
I wish I could do that little crying thing that he's doing now. It's so cute with the eyes watering and the little broken throat. So emotional.
Oh,
it's very touching.
Yeah.
But no, I just want to talk about the connection, sort of the bridge between the Lisney brothers here. I'm that bridge because to me it's all about Vatican II, the teachings of Vatican II, the universal call to holiness, the structured nature of the hierarchy, the economy of salvation, the way that God Almighty set up his church to serve everybody exactly where they are, and the availability of this theosis or Hezekiah, you call it? Hezekiah, Kieran? Yeah. It's available to everyone, and it's not, I don't feel like, oh, I wish I were Orthodox so I could practice that. No, I feel that the church is encouraging me to practice that, but it's also encouraging me to recognize my vocation in life, which is to be a married man with no children. And it's a rather unusual situation that I find myself in with my wife because of her particular attitude toward Catholic Church. She was raised Greek Orthodox, has a cultural hatred of the church.
Does she believe any of the Greek Orthodox stuff? Does she like any of it?
No.
She's got
she just thinks it's the best.
Awesome.
I don't want to talk about it because she doesn't like when I talk about her publicly.
Sure.
But she just thinks it's the best and that I should be Orthodox, not Catholic, because Orthodox is the best and Catholic is the worst. But does she know anything or does she believe anything? No, but it's the best. So it's a sort of a cultural hatred and a cultural pride, which doesn't attract me to it. But but the thing is, I want to emphasize the teachings of Vatican II because it's what's enabling us as Catholics to adapt to the modern world and to see our place in the church and how we have access to all of the everything we need, everything we need to have that deep relationship with Jesus Christ. That's what it's all about, and that's what Vatican II talks about and emphasizes. And there is a lot to unpack in the Catholic Church today, and if you want to talk about politics, you want to talk about the hierarchy and the drama within that, and it's
David,
all
do you
real.
get bored with all that though? Like, I'm so like.
I don't pay attention to it. I don't pay attention to current events. So.
Okay.
When I'm reading the documents of Vatican II or listening to an analysis of the documents of Vatican II, it's abstract, right? I mean, this is the role of the Pope, this is the role of the bishops, this is the role of the priests, this is the role of the lay people, this is the role of the religious. And so it's abstracted from current events. Current events drive me mad, right? The only reason I paid attention to current events over the past year is because of Donald Trump and all he's ostensibly done for the children in the womb. Like, that was my main reason why I was following Donald Trump so closely, because he seems to have done more for the unborn than any other politician. But I'm going to go back now to ignoring current events because Joe Biden, the Catholic, is ramping up abortion already. So I'm going to just go back to ignoring current events. But we have everything we need in the church.
Do you get bored with certain things that are flavored explicitly Catholic? So,
such as
the
Pope.
Just every time you say Vatican II or Vatican I, just want to barf a little bit. I'm not.
I'm on fire.
I feel so bad.
I'm on fire for the papacy and for the Second Vatican Council. It's like,
dude. The only ways that you can be that you could just elicit more of a response, and this probably says more about me than it does about anything else, is if you were to bring up Medjugorje or Fatima. I just,
David hates Medjugorje.
and I put Medjugorje and Fatima in the same breath.
Really?
And that's simply because, and it has nothing to do with the validity of the one event and the complete,
the entourage, the
complete demonic influence behind the other one. I'll throw that one to you, David. because they're so up on Catholic culture,
Yeah.
I want to vomit
Yeah.
every time I hear about them because I'm just
Yeah.
so bored. I could, like, oh, did you guys hear about the latest message in Medjugorje? And all I'm thinking is, when was the last time you opened your Bible? Go open your Bible.
Yeah.
And they're like, what's a Bible? It's the same people that don't, like, I don't know. I guess I just, like, a part of me hates right now folk Catholicism because it's so, like, it's coming out of a really bad time, and it just
Well,
it's just
I mean, I'm
so
sure
lame.
you want what's best for these people that are
I
getting
want what's
excited
best for
about all the
everybody.
wrong things, right? Like they're getting excited about all the wrong
Yes,
stuff. I'm sure you want
definitely.
I'm sure you want what's best for them, right?
Yeah, it's just like seeing the same episode of a television show over and over again. Eventually, you regardless of, like, the content, you're gonna hate it. You're gonna just be like, I can't. I've seen that so many times. I can't even, like, change it to the next one.
Yeah, I'm not exposed
Um,
to people's enthusiasm for anything Catholic. I don't have anyone around me that's enthusiastic about the Catholic Church. I don't watch any Catholic media that shows people that are excited about the Catholic Church, so I'm completely out of touch with that.
protected from that,
I'm not. I mean, I can understand what you're talking about with
right?
the revulsion or the disgust that you might feel, but I mean, you always have to remember to connect that to your own pathetic foolishness, right? And to
Yeah. Well,
acknowledge,
yeah. I prefaced it with that.
yeah, just acknowledge that you are proud and that you feel superior to another human being, which is not a good idea, right? As long as you know that.
Yeah, but I don't feel superior to those people. I just can't stand hearing the words Fatima and Medjugorje.
Are
Literally,
you
I hear
sure
those
you don't
words.
feel superior to them?
No, I definitely do, and I do with isolated incidents, but I'm double-minded,
Okay.
so it's something that's always combated. It's never
Yeah.
something that's just left
Unchecked.
unchecked, and, like,
Okay.
I'm never like, oh, this group of people, they're dumb. I'm like, oh, this group of people, ooh, and then
Yeah.
I'm like,
You're cheering for
then
them.
I'm like, but
You're cheering for them.
yeah, absolutely. I just don't want to. I'm just so tired of, like, the fact that Fatima was the main message of the 20th century in Catholicism, when it's just like, hey, you guys remember that? And it's like, why? Yeah, I do, but, like, can't we talk about something else? Can't we do something else? Because it seemed to me that the same people that would just go to church every Sunday, receive communion, and were just like Joe Six-Pack. Those are the same people that I just always associated with, like, these popular apparitions. And our dad is a big lover of Medjugorje,
Oh.
and he he's not obsessed with it by any means, but he's always thought that it was legitimate. He's like, no, a lot of good stuff has come from this. And there's this small faction of Catholics, they're not small anymore, that have come out of Medjugorje, and I won't name them, but they have all of these different types of devotionals that have sprung from this, David. And they're even more annoying. And so, like, you have the divine will devotion, and I like aspects of this one, but the flame of love devotion, and like, oh, I forget some of the other things that have come out of this, but, like, these things that they're always ever since I listened to Jimmy Akin talk about this, and, like, talk about how very similar this phenomenon was to the UFO phenomenon that would occur. He basically said there's this formula that, like, every couple of years there'd be a UFO book that would come out, and the person would claim that they had some kind of experience that built on the experiences of somebody else, and but they have revealed more, and somehow in the economy of things they're receiving more than that person, and they're going to give you something that you didn't get before. And the more that I look at these, like, certain devotionals in Catholicism, I'm like, that's doing the same thing, and Jimmy Akin pointed that out as well. So you have Saint Teresa's little way, and then you have another saint who came 20 or 30 years afterwards, and hers is called the littlest way. And it's like perhaps it's legitimate. I don't want to take a steaming dump on something that could be legitimate, but like from
I'm going to try to use my Orthodox method of not visualizing anything ever right now.
Right. No, I know, right? Steaming dump. No, but you see something like that, and I'm like, I'm always afraid of being tricked, and I feel a lot like I'm being tricked here. And so you have that with this Luisa Picaretta stuff that's going on now.
I don't know.
Where this woman, do you know the saint? No. That I think she's up for canonization, but dude, volumes upon volumes of her work has been analyzed, where she supposedly received all of these revelations from God. And they're just so excessive. They're so excessive. And Daniel O'Connor, he's on fire for the Lord. He's really cool. But his work with the divine will stuff, every time I hear it, it just screams heresy to me. And I can't pinpoint what it is. And at first it attracted me. But now the more that I hear about it, I'm like, there's something really wrong here. The explicitness, the extremeness of this, it seems like it's adding on to biblical revelation. It's almost as if it's like, here's the gospel, but here's the super gospel.
Right.
And we're going to give it to you. And it's like, which like from, you look at it and you read it and you're like, this seems really cool. This seems really neat. But like, there's so many holes in those things that it's just like, I don't even want to look at that anymore. It's just so irritating, because I just feel like everything is a trap, and I feel like inflamed. I feel like a big open nerve. And so then anytime something like that comes towards me, I just want to run from it, because if not, I'll vomit with rage. And so then like looking backwards is the only safe thing. And so, you read something that's a bit older, you read ancient Christianity, and you're like, oh, this feels a little bit better, because this was back when they didn't have this fringy crap that they had to deal with. They were just like trying to convince people that Mary was the mother of God, because they knew that if you took away her motherhood, then you could take away the divinity of Jesus. And so it's like, I want more of that, and I want less of this other stuff with this Italian saint who supposedly received a whole bunch of stuff and is, wearing the biggest crown in heaven next to such and such a person, because look at all she did. And, I don't know, maybe I'm just bitter, but
I want to get Kieran's thoughts on that epic rant there.
Oh, man.
Were you listening?
Yeah. I think, okay. Wow.
In a nutshell, because I do have to wrap it up here in 15 minutes. Or less.
So I think this is again going back to the Desert Father thing first.
Yeah.
When I read the contemporary saints of the Orthodox Church, there doesn't seem to be such a huge divide between them and the Desert Fathers or the patristics, and except for they're speaking out against heretical or sectarian groups, because obviously when the Desert Fathers were around, they were basically just fighting against nominalism, which is why they went out into the desert, because they realized that Christianity was just becoming too much of this easy thing. There was no cost to it anymore. So when I read somebody like Saint Paisios or Elder Ephraim or Saint Joseph the Hesychus,
pause that for a second. Have you heard of any of these, David?
Only through him. Are they any of them in the Philokalia?
No, so these would all be contemporaries. So they would all be 20th century.
Oh, no.
So just as a for instance, one of my favorite saints of the Orthodox Church is a saint by the name of Paisios, and he was born Arsenios, and he was born in 1924 and lived until 1994.
You mentioned him in your last interview with me.
Yeah, he is. The more that I read about him, the more that I pray to him, the more that I have interactions with him, the more I start to. In the Orthodox Church, we call it the phronema of the church, the mindset of the church, the whole ethos. So our connection, just as you guys would have, the saints post, schism, you would look to a saint like Saint Teresa of Avila or Saint Francis of Assisi and say, yes, when I'm close to them, I'm closer to the Church of Christ from your perspective, right? You're putting on the mindset of the church when you read these saints, which is why it's unchristian to not read the lives of the saints. It's unchristian to not pray for them or pray to them. It's unchristian to not ask for their intercession. When we do away with the saints, we do away with the church as a whole, because they're the church triumphant. We're the church that may or may not actually make it. But when I read somebody like Saint Paisios or Saint Porphyrios, and I compare it to Saint Anthony of the Desert and the works written on him by Athanasius, or when I read the Ladder of Divine Ascent, or when I read some other such patristic work, there doesn't seem to be, because there is no derivations from, okay, well, we're going to go this route or we're going to go that route. And David, from your perspective, they all get you to the same place. And that might well be. I can't pass a judgment and say that it won't. Somebody following Fatima is not going to be glorified in heaven. I can't make a judgment like that. I'm not God. But from what we say in the Orthodox perspective is that we know that grace is within the church. We just don't know where else it is. So we're not going to say that grace is definitely in this Presbyterian church over here. We're not going to say that grace is over in the Catholic Church. We're not going to say that grace is, with, God forbid, well, God don't forbid, but the Jehovah's Witness or some other crazy sectarian group. I'm sure there's grace working. There is grace working all throughout the world. But we just know that it's in the Orthodox Church. And we see that captivated from the time of Pentecost all the way up into our modern day saints of the Orthodox Church. And there are elders alive today who literally their faces shine like the sun, just as Moses when he came down from Sinai. And just that's the Orthodox ethos. So all that to say, I think what Aidan's kind of getting at is that the overarching issue, or maybe problematic part on the part of Catholic sort of fanaticism, would be that there's such a fixation on this thing here and this thing here and this thing here, and you get all these sort of little groups. And what I personally see it as, and I don't mean it to be offensive, but what I personally see a lot of this sort of Catholic devotions to be, it's very similar to Pentecostalism in a lot of ways, because it's kind of just like a free-for-all, if you will. And I can't, again, pass a judgment and say, well, there is no benefit coming from that. There is no fruit coming from that. But at the same time, I can look at it and say, yeah, but it's still dangerous. Like, I personally wouldn't do it. And I would advise somebody who I love probably not to get involved with it either. Like, my dad spent 12 years praying the St. Bridget prayers so that he would have X amount of time out of purgatory. And that's kind of autistic. Like, that's very point counting, and it's like, that seems like an add extra to the gospel, which is basically just union with Christ through Christ's salvific work, and our working with the grace that he has given, just us reaching out and taking hold of the gift that he's giving us. That is salvation. But when you add all these extras onto it, they might be true. I can't say for certain if they're not, if they're true or not, but I would guess that if it's an addition to the gospel message, then it's probably best to stay away from it. And that would be the politest way I could say.
One thing I would say is that, first of all, in terms of apparitions, they're all optional. Like, even the approved ones are optional. You don't have to believe them. And there's nothing contained within those apparitions which are approved, which contradicts or adds to the gospel. So there's only one public revelation, and it's public revelation ended with the death of the last apostle. And so there's no risk as a Catholic, if you're a faithful Catholic following the teachings of the Catholic Church, there's no risk of going beyond the gospel. Okay, that's number one. Number two, we are being guided and directed to what is essential for our salvation, but there's so many shiny toys. I guess that's one way we could put it, like, this devotion, that devotion, these sorts of things. But we are sternly warned by the church to avoid taking on too many devotions or getting distracted by our devotions, or completely, basically what it boils down to is it's very easy to completely miss the point of religion. And there's a famous Catholic saying that religion is for those who lack faith, right? Religion is for those who lack faith. So the goal is to have faith, right? The goal is to...
Hey guys.
Yep.
I am super sorry. My wife is having a panic attack right now.
Okay.
I just got a text message.
Okay.
I love both of you very, very much.
I love you too, and
I love you too, buddy.
We'll peace out. We'll talk to you soon. Good luck to your wife. Give her all the best.
All right.
We're praying for her now.
Pray for you, buddy.
I love you guys.
Talk to you very
Love you
soon. Thanks
too.
for doing this, man.
All right. Thank you guys.
Bye, Kieran.
Take
All
care.
right.
Peace
Bye-bye.
out. Bye. Is it something I said?
No.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Is his wife prone to anxiety attacks?
Yeah.
I went through that
Been
as
happening
late adolescent in my early 20s. I
Uh-huh.
went through that for a year. It's very, very, very scary. Very scary.
It's not fun.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was a panic attack or if it was an anxiety attack at work.
Same thing.
Because but usually it's when people say that they have like a panic attack, usually they say they feel like they have the sensation like they're going to die.
Mhm.
I didn't have the sensation that I was
Okay.
going to die, but I felt this overwhelming
Adrenaline.
anxiety for like, I don't know, 3 hours.
Oh.
It was really gross. It was
Tiring.
awful. It was, dude, it's so tiring. It's really, the job's been tough. That day was really gross. And it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't ever want to feel that again. I almost left that day. I almost bounced out of there. They're like, what's going to make you feel better? I'm like, leaving and never coming back.
Yeah.
But
Peace
peace
is so valuable. I learned that this past year has been rough for me because I haven't had access to the sacraments as much, and I lost my peace a couple of times, and it's I talked to you about that privately, and it's not good. We're so fragile. We're so vulnerable to demonic attack too. And
I know I'm dumb, dude.
I don't want to go back to being a plaything of Satan and his demons, because it's really not fun.
Well, aren't you always? Because I feel like I always am. I feel like I'm just like, I'm easily roped into it. I feel like, you know what I mean? And then like I even get tricked into like thinking something, and I'm like, great, I just disconnected myself from the church. And it's like, you didn't even sin. You just thought about sinning.
Yeah, but there's a palpable difference. Like what I went through, and I explained it to you and your brother. I'm not going to talk about it publicly just because it's too embarrassing. But what I went through, I mean, is like I literally I've opened the gateway to the demons, and they're playing with me, and I have to get to confession as soon as possible. And as soon as I got to confession, bang, I had peace. And so I know that I am a disgusting sinner, unworthy of salvation, but I also know that I'm in the state of grace because I went to confession, right? And I know that I want to keep going to confession and availing myself of the sacraments, especially confession and the Eucharist, because even though I know that left to my own devices, I'll just welcome the demons in again. I will, right? I've proven that. Even though I know that, God still loves me. He wants me to be saved. And he wants me to avail myself of the sacraments in a worthy manner, and to avail myself of prayer better and better. And this is the focus of my Catholic way of life. And that's why I don't see a big difference between the glorious way of the Orthodox Church that your brother was talking about and bragging about, and rightly so, because it is something that I think is sorely lacking in most Christians, right? But
yeah, dude.
But there's not a big distinction between that glorious way and the way that Christ is leading us as Catholics toward. And it really is a very, very simple, difficult but simple approach that we are called to take with our faith, right? And to not get caught up in religion is a very, very important part of that. Not getting caught up in religion, so that you can have that faith, you can have that fresh, spontaneous love, and have access to that grace, right?
Yeah, I concur. It's funny though, because the way you talk about confession is the way that I talk about it. People, I was envious because Kieran was talking about communion the other day, and George was talking about communion, and they were just like, basically, it's like grace just like rains down upon everybody at divine liturgy, and I'm like, man, that's dope. Like we got to start talking about mass the same way.
Yeah.
But I was thinking like um, I've I have a real struggle with communion, just like concentrating and focusing and treating it the way that I should.
Yeah.
Confession, no. Confession, like I feel a physical, like there's a physical component to confession
Oh yeah.
that is immediate,
Wings.
and it's like, yeah, and people will be like, well, that's just psychological, and it's like, no, it's not, because you know, like this, I mean, there is a psychological component,
For sure.
obviously, but like, if I tell you, David, like if I list off all the sins that, you know, I've committed to you, and you're like, yeah, man, that feels good. There's a sense of camaraderie where we both like talk about like how ugly we are. I mean, there's something nice about that, but like, that's not like that. It's just not the same thing. There's something very viscerally real happening at confession.
Yeah.
That I've been blessed with, and I feel like you've probably been blessed with feeling too, where you walk out of there and you're just like,
Free.
you know,
Free.
wondering how long it'll take you to to get you know, to dirty that slate.
Never again, never again, never again.
But yeah, the path is simple, but I convolute
It's treacherous.
everything.
Yeah, you're overcomplicating your faith walk, I think. And the nice thing about having a brother like Kieran is he can really cut to the chase, and everything he's emphasizing, I think, is what you and I and every Christian needs to hear, right? Which is, don't get distracted. Don't get distracted.
Right.
Don't allow yourself to get distracted. Just because it's a religious thing that you're distracted by doesn't mean you're not distracted, right?
Right.
I mean, look at the Jews in the time of Jesus. Were they religious or distracted? Well, both. They were distracted by religion.
Right.
They couldn't see what was right in front of them, Jesus Christ. So it's the same thing with us. We need to get beyond that shallow and lazy religiosity and get to the hard work of self-discipline and self-control, fortitude, and temperance. And I mean, it's Lent now, right? So I'm trying to be good. I'm trying to be self-disciplined. But I mean, you know by now that I'm not exactly a hero of self-discipline, self-control, especially when it comes to food. So I just,
dude, you and every other person in North America.
I like to cheat. That's one thing I like about Lent is like, oh, I'm gonna cheat a little bit now. I'm gonna have what I'm not supposed to have.
Do you do Sundays?
I do Sundays. Sunday's my cheat day.
Oh,
is that
I
okay?
haven't been going near food. Yeah.
Is that a Catholic thing? Sunday's a cheat day.
I don't know. There's debate on that. Some people are like, "Oh, don't do that," and other people are like, "No, it's fine." Sunday's a feast day. I don't see why that's an issue.
I pray the glorious mysteries on Sundays only. The rest is sorrowful during Lent.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's brutal.
Why?
That's
too much sorrow.
It's no, not at all. It's cool. I mean, no, I'm terrible, dude. My Uncle Mark and I have had lengthy discussions about like how the sorrowful mysteries are the best ones.
Yeah.
We're just like, yeah, I love the ones where Jesus suffers because he
I caused that.
And I mean, yeah, but at the same time though, there's this identification with it where like it's probably disgusting, and I'll probably like, hey, we gotta talk about this at some point. Like my favorite mystery is the crowning of thorns. I don't know what it is about the crowning of thorns, but the idea of a man of sorrows, where I'm like, I just want to go up to that dude's feet and I want to kiss them. And maybe it's just like metal, you know, maybe it's just like there's something really like brutal and manly about Jesus wearing a crown of thorns, which like, if that's as basic, you know, if I'm being basic with it, that's fine.
It's just psychological.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, Jesus is a great idea. He really serves as this icon. Yeah, Jordan Peterson this talk, but yeah, there's something really really great about the sorrowful mysteries that like I just want to like most of the time I just want to latch onto those because I feel like I suffer more often than experience joy.
Yeah. Lucky you.
But
So when I'm praying the crowning with thorns, I sometimes gather up a little bit of spittle in my mouth, like as if I'm going to spit on him, and I just put.
do you swallow it then? Or do you have to?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't. I gather up the spit because I know this is the setting where the soldiers were spitting on him and stuff like that. So I consider myself as a sinner to have spat upon Jesus when he was being crowned with thorns. Okay, so I place myself in the scene and I get the spit ready, and then I don't spit on him. So I just take it right to the edge, like I prepare myself to spit on him, and then I decide not to, right? And I mean, it would be inappropriate in my shrine to like start spitting on my shrine anyway. I mean, I could do it, but I mean, the whole point is to go through the theater and then sort of reverse the damage. Like I'm in the same situation, and in the past when I sinned, I was spitting on him. So now I go right up to the edge of spitting on him, and then I just don't, right?
I could propose an alternative where you don't do any of that, and you just give him a towel. I mean, wouldn't that,
Yeah.
You could. Who is the supposed saint that gave him
Veronica?
Yeah, gave him Veronica. You could Veronica that, and I love that. I love that image. That's a beautiful image of somebody going up. Something very simple. But yeah, I like that, David. That's
I mean, I don't really feel worthy to play the role of the good guy.
Do you ever feel worthy to play like a brutal Roman soldier, though? Do you feel like you're butch enough for that? Because I always feel like because I feel like I'd be kidding myself.
I'm not a soldier. In the scene, I'm not a soldier. I'm David Ross, the weak, pathetic, self-indulgent loser, and I'm just there spitting on him and like shoving his crown in and hurting him and just laughing and not really understanding what I'm doing. Just enjoying it and going along with it and sort of hating this man who is the least hateable creature. Well, he's not a creature, but the least hateable human.
David Heresy, come on, man.
I caught myself.
Creature.
But no, I don't call myself. I put myself as I am in that scene, and in all the scenes of the sorrowful mysteries. But I'm trying to approach Jesus Christ in the suffering, in the sorrowful mysteries, with a comfort which is realistic, which means that Jesus, don't trust me because I will probably hurt you again. Don't trust me, but just give me the strength to be here and to confront what I did, to be honest about what I did to you, and to, if possible, feel just a little tiny part of that pain that I caused you, and maybe offset some of that pain that I caused you. But don't give me too much because I'm weak and I'm going to be crushed by it. So just, if you want to let me taste just a small amount, please don't give me too much realism when it comes to sharing your pain. But I want to make a little gesture and be there. But I want to remain realistic about the fact that I'm a disgusting sinner. And I don't want to sort of enter the scene and become a hero. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I guess it's all just it's methodology. Because like if that's what keeps you humble, that's what keeps you humble.
Yeah.
There's a Desert Fathers story about two monks, both commit the same sin, and they both go and they receive their penances, and they're both told to go into their cells for a year with bread and water, and they're supposed to fast and come out after that year, and they'll that's their penance. And so after a year, the one comes out and he's vibrant and radiant and beautiful, and the other one comes out and he is just like just molested basically, and their father is like, so what did both of y'all do for that year? And the one guy's just like, I praised the Lord, and he's the one with the face, and he's like, and I thanked him for forgiving me. And the other one said, I beat my chest and I cried to God for mercy. And their superior was like, both are acceptable and in the eyes of God. And all I got out of reading that story was, I want to be the guy with the radiant face. Like,
yeah, it sounds like the better
like,
approach.
I think it's because David, I think it all depends on the personality too, because like it depends on what your natural proclivities are. Like, so if you're, um, you know, self devaluing and you have poor self esteem, your approach towards God should probably lend itself to praise and to
Thanksgiving.
something uplifting. Yeah, I mean, it would basically be like you wouldn't prescribe um, the imitation of Christ to somebody who's humble and somebody who's you wouldn't give that to Saint John. You'd give that to somebody who's like a disgusting, brutal, like prideful douche.
Yeah.
Or what's that other book on humility? Very famous Catholic work about humility,
The
but people
12
are like, yeah, you should.
the 12 steps of humility or whatever it was.
No, it's something else. It's if by Father Cajun or something. Cajun.
Okay.
But it's I tried reading that book and I'm like, Dad, I couldn't. And I'm like, I have to give this book back to you. And I did some research on it. And some people are like, yeah, you should really either not read that book if you're very sensitive, or you should really only read like a page or two at a time because it's just too brutal. It'll just gobsmack you. And so it sounds like your approach, yourself well enough that um, handle yourself with rougher hands than other people do, I guess.
A lot of my priests in confession try to warn me against despair, like being too hard on myself and this sort of thing. And I always respond that it's the complete opposite is the case. I err on the side not of despair, but of presumption. It's like, I know God is good. I know he loves me.
Right.
That's why I'm so hard on myself. It's because I know I'm taking advantage of his kindness and his goodness. I know that. I'm presuming on his goodness. Right. I know that. That's why I might even come across to you as being really hard on myself. It's because I know myself. I know how I presume on his goodness constantly. Like, I have no doubt that no matter how pathetic and disgusting I am, my faith in him and my hope in him is rock solid and is completely warranted, right? That's what makes me dwell, if you will, on how disgusting I am. It's just it is disgusting because I know that I shouldn't be coasting to heaven. I shouldn't be coasting to heaven, but that's what I'm doing.
Right.
Why am I coasting?
Because Twinkies taste awesome.
It's like, why?
Yeah.
I mean, I want to be a hero. I want to be have heroic faith, but God just keeps humbling me and just showing me like, no, I'm weak. So I accept that. I accept that for now. But when I hear Kieran talk, it's like, yeah, I aspire to the discipline of the Desert Fathers. I want the veil to be lifted.
Definitely, dude. I do as well. But everything for me is the same and selfish. It's all just because I'm just like, man, like it's hilarious. I always fear that my contrition is imperfect because I'm just like, Jesus is God. It's a very basic thing. It's like, so if he's God, I better do all the stuff that he says because I genuinely believe that. So he does have the key to everything. And then it's pretty simple. So it's like, I guess I should feel bad about the things that I've done and then, go from there, X, Y, Z. And it's, I don't know if that's a gift. I don't know if that's like presumption. I don't know what that is, but like, when I came back to the Lord, those were my thoughts. It wasn't some kind of miraculous thing where it was like, wait, Jesus is God. It's like, nah, I've always known he's right. It's just that Joel Osteen just made it unappealing long enough for me to like justify bad behavior. And so I pray for true contrition. But I find other ways to despair. Do you know what I mean? My despair is not in the Lord. My despair is in my own cyclical thinking, like being stuck in my own head. So like there are certain things that I want freedom from in this life, and I find despair in those more than I do about like anything salvific. Do you
Okay.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is like, again, selfishness.
Feeling sorry for yourself for patterns of behavior, and just
It's not so much feeling sorry for myself. It's usually literally just being stuck in thought. And so like it's like being in a cage um it's difficult to explain, like, which focuses on the religiosity of something rather than the heart of the matter. And so it's like, um I'm reading a book right now about Elder Paisios, and one of the main character was into yoga and all this other stuff, and then he went to the holy mountain, and he met this saint, and this guy's awesome. But he was talking to another priest, monk, and he was like, teach me how to pray. And he's like, you just talk to Jesus as if he's sitting right there with you. That's how you pray. And just such a basic, like, beautiful, like, assessment of like that's prayer. And then, for me, I'm just like, gotta get this right, gotta get that right, gotta get this right. And it's like, no, and you just have to sit there and talk honestly with Jesus, and that's good enough. But like, for me, like, if the technique looks appealing and um it has a certain, like, flavor to it, I get sucked into that really fast, which is probably why I was so into yoga, because there was this mechanical system.
yeah.
There was this very, like, obvious package that you bought into, where you're like, look at all these things that you get with this. And you could obsess about the particulars of each thing, and as a result you would see some kind of physical benefit, or you feel some kind of mental freedom as a result. And that just kind of carried over um, into prayer for me. So really, I guess if I were to have a spiritual advisor who knew those inclinations and knew that obsessive compulsive component of my mind, they would probably just tell me that my prayer should be at a fixed time, and none of the prayers themselves should be fixed, and I should have no uh, I should have no repetition in my prayers, just because of my tendency
Yeah.
to fixate. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
You and I are similar in our impoverished prayer lives, from what I've understood. Because I really only feel like I'm benefiting from spontaneous prayer, but I'm never going to give up my fixed prayers, because the church tells me to pray fixed prayers, and I'm just
mhm.
going to do it. I don't
Right.
seem to be really benefiting from it, but I'm just going to keep doing it. Now, like your brother said, is that just pure autism? Checklist thing? Well, I mean, I don't
Maybe.
know, but I trust I trust the church, and I'm just going to keep praying the fixed prayers. Just like when I read the Bible, I don't understand 90% of it. I understand maybe
Right.
10%, maybe, right? But I read the
Right.
entire Bible, all 72 books or 73 books, whatever it is. I don't understand. I don't understand the Bible. I've read, commentaries. I read when the saints talk about the Bible, then I understand bits and pieces here and there.
Mhm.
But I, I'm not a genius when it comes to understanding the Bible. I'm not a genius when it comes to appreciating the fixed prayers. I can think about the fixed prayers and say, well, this is good because it teaches me about that, and reminds me of that, and the sign of the cross tells me about the Trinity and the Incarnation and whatever. Like I could do an analysis of the Our Father prayer. I've read 100 of them, but that's all intellectual, right? Like when I do my
Right.
praying, I just want to be connecting to God, and to have the peace that comes from having a true faith and having a true relationship with Jesus Christ. That's all I want.
Right.
And in my fixed prayers, it's dominated just by anxiety. Am I going to get through this? I know that I'm going to get through it, because I get through it every day. But it just, from the very
Right.
beginning, when I start, it's just like, am I really going to get through this? And it's just a nervousness that I have. I've shared this with you many times. You know where I'm coming from. And but I'm going to keep doing it. And my spontaneous prayers, I think, will nourish and enrichen my fixed prayers. But more than that, the sacraments will improve my prayer life. And I can tell you, by neglecting the sacraments because of COVID and the lockdown, my prayer life has suffered. And because my prayer life has suffered, my self-discipline, self-control has suffered. So I see a direct correlation between frequent sacraments and quality prayer life and my ability to have some sort of control and morality. Very direct correlation. So for me, it's all about the Catholic Church, her sacraments, her prayer life, and so that I can be a good moral person and say yes to God at every moment and say no to temptation and say no to sin. Say yes to grace and no to sin. So the sacraments...
For me, it's all about me. Hey, actually, David, that being said, I have to go.
Yeah, I have to go too.
It is late. I'm down to 17%, and I have some episodes of Friends that I have to watch before.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it, and good luck with the COVID. I hope you feel a lot better soon. And
I'm supposedly cured of it by Saturday.
Yeah.
I can go back. So we'll see. Thanks, man.
Take care of yourself.
If anybody asks.
And
it doesn't hurt.
I'll be praying for you and Kieran in a special way tonight by name. Hope you'll do the same for me, and
I will do the same for
prayer
you.
intentions.
All right, buddy. It was good seeing you. I love you, man.
Love you lots. Take good care of yourself, okay?
Yeah, I will. All right.
Talk to you soon.
Later.